How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Yud Aleph, I think. Why not? No. What do you mean, why not? No, not at all. Well, I shouldn't say not at all. We'll get there at the end. But we're studying Daf Yud, Daf 10 of Masechta Kiddushin. Oh, okay. Daf 10. We talk about Be'etzem Kiddushay Biyah. Oh man, what should I do? Should I stretch? Should I yawn? What should I do? Alright, I'll stretch now, yawn 1 second. Rabbi Yisrael, we need you. What would Babylon Talmud be without being able to dedicate these activities to you? Alright. So, here we go. Alright. Friends, we're going to start in Daf Yud of Masechta Kiddushin, about 8 or 10 lines into the page by the 2 dots, okay? And Daf Yud Amud Aleph by the 2 dots, about 10 lines or so into the page. Ibaylu de ask a kasha, tchilas bia kone, o sof bia kone. Beautiful. Oh. So they ask the kasha. In the Beis HaMedrash, they ask the kasha. When we say that there's a kiddushay bia, they can be mekadesh, a fellow can be mekadesh a fellow with bia. So, at what point is the Kiddushin Chal? At what point is she considered betrothed? At the beginning of Bia or at the end of Bia? Let's go weiter for a second. Nafkamine, for example, what's the difference? For example, going Shehe'e Rabba, Ufashtu Yad v'kibla Kiddushin me'acher, Inami the Kohen Gadol, the Kokoni Besula Bebia, Mai. Friends, we've learned about Ha'ara, right? I don't know, Mistamin Yuvamis or Ksubis, maybe both. Ha'ara is be'etzem, it's not complete bia, but it's like it's a machlokes, but at most it's initial penetration. So the shaila is ha'ara enough? If you do ha'ara, is that already considered kiddushay bia, or does it need to be gemar bia, the completion of bia, and at that point she's considered engaged? So what's the nafkamina? So let's read that again. So Ibaylu, tchilas bia kona, is she mikudeshes at the beginning of bia? So would ha'ara be enough? O sof bia kona, or is it the completion of bia that at that point she would be engaged? Nafkamine. So we're going to give 2 practical differences. Kigon she'e rabba. Well, what if they did ha'ara? So there was tchilas bia, ufashta yada v'kibla kiddushin me'acher. And then she extended her hand and received kesef kiddushin from somebody else. So, if you say that tchilas bia is enough, so then the second fellow is not engaged to her because she was already engaged to the first fellow after ha'ara. But if you say that tchilas bia is not kone, well then she was not yet engaged to the first fellow and she'll be engaged to the second fellow. So that's one nafkamina. Inami, alternatively, l'kohen gadol. What about a Kohen Gadol? Kohen Gadol has to marry a Besula. Now, if he's being Kone a Besula, if he's being Mekadesh a Besula Bibia, well, after Ha'ara, she will already be a Be'ula. She will no longer be considered a Besula. And if she's not yet Mikudeshes at that point, well then, if he's only Mikudesh, if the Kiddushin is only at the end of Bia, well then at the end of the Bia, when Kiddushin kicks in, she was already a Be'ula. She was no longer Besula, because from Ha'ara, she was already no longer a besula. So so what do we say? Amar Ameimar Mishmei Derave Kol Aboel Daito Al Gamar Bia, that anybody who has Bia, their intention is for the completion of Bia. And if I understand correctly, what that means is that the Kiddushin only kicks in at the end. Which means that after Ha'ara, she's not yet Mikudeshes. Fine. Ibayu de ask the kasha, and this kasha is be'etzim going to take us till the end of our. Is it be'etzim going to? No. There's just going to be a chunk, the next chunk, and then there's going to be one more chunk after this. So the next part of the daf is going to discuss is bia, and it's interesting kasha. I wouldn't have thought this. I mean, is kiddushay bia actually nisuin, which is interesting, meaning. Is kiddushay bia just kiddushin, like kesef, like shtar? Or actually, if you're mekadesh a woman bibia, then you are, it sounds to, if I understand correctly, then that would already be nisuin as well. They would already be considered completely married after bia. So Yibarlu de Asakasha, bia, nisuin, osa, erisin, osa. So, if a fellow is mekadesh, a fellow bibia, so is it nisuin osa? Does that make them completely married? Oh, Erisin also, or is it no? Is it just another form of engagement, of betrothalment, like kesef, like shtar? And bia also is simply Erisin, and after this bia, they would be engaged. So nafkamine, what's an nafkamine? Liyorsha, for example, to inherit her. Wait, 1 second. Ah, interesting. Okay. Interesting. I'm not sure that we actually resolved this question. Oh man, Babylon, 1 sec. Okay, back to the program. So now, so where am I? Okay, fine. So nafkamine, the difference is the Yarsha, for example, to inherit her, right? He would only, a fellow only inherits a fella after they're fully married, after Nisuin. V'litamila, if he's a kohen and she dies, so if it's Nisuins, then he could become Tamiter in the cemetery. If not, if it's only Erisin, then not. Ulaha for Nidaril, to be able to be made for her Nidarim alone, right? After Nisuin, he's made for her Nidarim alone, but when she's engaged, so then her father can also be made for her Nidarim. As long as, right, if she's not a Bogeres. If I'm not mistaken, yeah, I think that's correct. Nisuin osa. Now, if you say that it's considered nisuin, bia is considered nisuin, yorsha. So then the fellow would inherit her if she dies. Umitamila, and if she dies, he would become tamei for her. If he's a kohen, umei for nidarel, and he alone would be able to be made for her nidarim if it's nisuin. So v'amart erisin osa. Wait, where am I? Where did I confused myself? 1 second. I'm going to back up a few lines because I confused myself. Nafkamina liyarsha b'tamilo avnedera iyamart nisuin osa yarsha b'tamilo mefinedera v'iyamart erisin osa. And if you say that no, but it's only erisin, eino yarsha, then he won't inherit her. Ve'eno b'tamilo, if he's a kohen, he would not become tamid for her. Ve'eno mefinedera, and he cannot be made for a nedarim alone. But if she's if they're engaged, then he is made for the nedarim together with the father. If they're only engaged, then he's made for an adarm together with the father. Okay, fine, but not alone. Where am I? So what do we say? So do we say that Kiddushin Bia actually Be'etzim does Nisuin or just Erisin? So Amar Abaye Zokt Abaye Toshma Kominir Ha'av Zakai Bebito, that a father merits with his daughter when she's a Ketana or a Naira B'Kiddusheh, with her Kiddushin, right? He can accept Kesef Kiddushin on her behalf. Bekesef B'Shtar, he can accept the Shtar Kiddushin on her behalf. Uvebia, and he can, have bia with this fellow. Okay. V'zaka b'mtziosuf ma'asedeh, whatever she makes, whatever she finds, he can have. Uva'aforas nidara, he can be made for her nidarim. U'mekabel ezgita, and he can receive her get. I believe Rashi says it's only from Erisin, meaning assuming that she is a Kitana or a Nairi, can receive her get. So Rashi Dafka says from Erisin. I think that, so if they're already married, so then I think that she's out of his domain, right? And I think that she receives her own get. Can a father receive a get for his daughter who's a Kitana? I don't remember. I feel like maybe it's come up in the Gemara. I feel like it's come up before. I feel like maybe he can, but I'm not sure. At the same time, like, once she is married to somebody else, I think she's out of her father's domain entirely. So I don't remember. But definitely if she's an arusa, if she's only engaged, so the father can receive a get on her behalf. Ve'eno ochel peris b'chayel. And if this girl inherits property from her father's father, from her grandfather, so then the father does not have access to those fruits. They're hers. Nises, but if she gets married, Yasser Olav Abal, the husband kind of has sort of higher, has access, right? Has one up on the father. She'ochel peris b'chaya, that if his wife inherits property while they're married, he can eat the fruits, right? Nichsei melug, he can eat those fruits. Katani bia v'katani nises. No, so we listed, right, that the father is zoche bebito b'kidushia b'kesef b'shtar b'bia. And then we mentioned later on, Nises, that if she gets married, Yasser alav habal. So it sounds like Kiddushin b'kesef shtar and bia on the one hand, and then Nisuin would be something else. So it sounds like Kiddushay bia is separate from Nisuin. It's only Erisin, it's not Nisuin. Nisuin is something else. So answer to Gemara, Kikatoni Nises Ashayre. No, when it says, but Nises, that's talking about Kesef, it's talking about Shtar, because those would only be Erisin, but you can argue that Bia, however, would already be Nisuin. When it says Nises, it's not talking about Bia. Bia is already Nisuin. By Kesef and Shtar, we then have this added layer of but if there was marriage, if there was Nises, because Kesef and Shtar, I can argue the only make Erisin, but you can argue that Bia already would make Nisuin. What time is it? It's 1:15. Is it a little bit late for coffee? I have one sip left of my coffee from this morning. It's sitting right in front of me. I feel like my brain is a little slow right now. What should I do, friends? Should I go for it? It's like a sip. It's a little bit late. What time is it? I'm going to go for it. Wow. I feel like my brain's working now. How many coffees did I have today? I had 2 already. I think, I already had 2. All right, what let me tell you? I even slept a little bit more last night because I overslept my alarm shtickle. Thank God I wasn't late for my first groove, but I looked at the clock. I was like, oh, it's a little bit late, but thank God I didn't miss anything. Oh my Rava says, Rava Tashma Kaminir, Bashalo Shonim Viom Echod. If you have a model, you have a girl who's already 3 years old. Miskadesh is Bibia, so she could be betrothed with Bia already. Okay, so we're talking about Kiddushay Bia. Vim Baalei Yavam Kano. Wow, and if her husband dies and now she has to do Yibum, okay, fine, it's Yibum. If she's married at 3 years old, somebody sleeps with her, Chayev for Eishes Ish. Umetame is Boala, the Tam Mishkav Tachton Ke'elyon. If she's a Nida, this girl's 3 years old, she's a Nida. And then if a fellow sleeps, so the halacha is if a fellow sleeps with a Nida, so then he becomes Tameh like her, an Avatuma. Now, one of the halachas of Nida is that she's Mitami Mishkav Tachton Ke'elyon. That if she sits on like a bed, so then the bed becomes an Avatuma just like her. Now, if a fellow sleeps with a Nida, so he also becomes an Avatuma just like her. And if he sits on a bed, Oichit, the bed becomes Tameh. The difference is though that the bed in his case would be a Rishon L'Tumah, not an Avatuma, but Beseder. So we say that if this young girl is a Nida and a fellow sleeps with her, so then he would have this status of Bo'el Nida, B'Matami Mishkav Tachton Ke'elyon. V'im Niseis L'Koyin, and if she gets, and here we go, V'im Niseis L'Koyin, and if she gets married to a Koyin, or Chelas B'Truma, if she's a Bas Yisrael, she can eat Truma. So, just to point out, we mentioned Miskadeshes B'Bia, and now we're talking about Nisuin. So it sounds like Bia and Nisuin are two under Ezach, two separate things. If any of the forbidden relationships sleep with her, Mumasin al Yada, they will be killed. Vehi Petura, but she's Petura, of course, because she's a Ketana. If somebody who's Pasul sleeps with her, for example, a Mamzer, so then she can't marry a Kohen. Katani Bia v'Katani Nises. So we mentioned Bia, right, Kiddushay Bia, but we also mentioned Nisuin. So it sounds like Kiddushay Bia is separate from Nisuin, it's not Nisuin. Hachikamer, Ihane Nisuin, the Koyeninu, Ochelas B'Truma. Nisht, you could say that Taka Kiddushay Bia would be Nisuin, and what it's saying is that Kiddushay Bia by a girl who's already 3 years old would be already Kiddushin, and it would be like it would be Erisin, be Nisuin Be'etzim. Right? Kiddushay Bia would be Nisuin. Now, if this Bia, which is Nisuin, was to a Kohen, then she could already eat Truma. So, okay, fine. And I think that we don't resolve that. I believe that we don't resolve that. Or do we? Wait one second. Or do we? Wait. Give me a second to think. I think that this next chunk, right? I think this next chunk actually gets into this question some more. Okay. So now for the next and final chunk. Tashma Kamanir. The next and final chunk is an entire Amud, but okay. Excuse me. Tashma Kamanir. Uchvasholach Yochanan ben Bagbag Eitzel Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira the Nitzivin. So Yochanan ben Bagbag sent to Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, who was in Nitzivin, Shamaiti alecha shata omer, I heard about you, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, that you say, Arusa bas Yisrael ocheles bitruma, that a betrothed bas Yisrael, if she's betrothed to a kohen, and she's an arusa, she can already eat truma. Shalach lo, to which Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira responds, Va'ata yata omer kain, don't you agree that at least me'ikar adin, a arusa bas Yisrael who's engaged, who's betrothed to a kohen, can eat truma? Muchzakani b'chashata baki b'chadrei Torah lidrash b'kal v'chomer. Says Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, I don't understand. Ben Bagbag, I thought that you were a baki in Torah, that to learn logical arguments, kal v'chomers. I'ata yodea, don't you know after all? Umashivcha kinainis, when it comes to a non-Jewish slave woman be'etzem, she'ein biyasa ma'chilasa b'truma, that if she, if her master has bia with her, that won't allow her to eat truma. Kaspa ma'chilasa b'truma, but when he buys her with money, so at that point, right? What do we say? Miknas kaspo heim yochlu belachmo. Is that what it is? That be'etzem, right, is avodim and shvachis, they eat truma. So ma'chilasa, right? She'en biyasa ma'chilasa b'truma, kaspa ma'chilasa b'truma. So by shifcha kenainis, if the master has bia with her, that's not what enables her to eat truma. When he purchases with money, at that point she can eat truma. Zo, when it comes to kiddushin, shebi also ma'chilasa b'truma, that by having bia she can eat truma. When she has bia, she can eat truma. We're going to have to see what bia are we talking about. But once she has bia, if she's a bas Yisrael and he's a kohen, she can now eat truma. Eino din shekaspa ma'chilasa b'truma. Then certainly kesef should allow her to eat. Right? Kiddushay kesef should allow her to eat truma. So already once she's betrothed, she can eat truma. Right? So again, if by a shifcha kanainis where bia does not allow her to eat truma, kesef does allow her to eat truma. By kiddushin where bia allows her to eat truma, certainly then kesef should allow her to eat truma, right? And that once they're betrothed, she can already eat truma. Avol, but says Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, even though me'ikar adin, she should be able to eat truma. Ma'aseh, what can I do? Shari amu chacham, because the sages said, ein arusa bas Yisrael ocheles betruma, that a betrothed bas Yisrael does not eat truma ad shetikanis lechuppah, until Nisuin. Okay, and we're going to explain why later on. We've seen why in the past. I think even just a few days ago we saw why. But be seder. Fine. Now, hechidami. What's this bia? Right. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira made a kal v'chomer with bia. What bia are we talking about? If the kal v'chomer deals with bia post chuppah by Nisuin, there was already Kiddushin at some other time, a year earlier, let's say, and then we're talking about the bia after the chuppah. And if we're talking about kesef shayidei chuppah, my understanding is that that's talking about not kesef Kiddushin, but the ksubah. Of course, in both cases, obviously, if it's post chuppah, she would be able to eat truma. What do we need the kal v'chomer for? And if the kal v'chomer is from bia that's happening after the chuppah, and we're saying, well, if bia after the chuppah allows her to eat truma because it's post chuppah and it's nisuin, so then kesef kiddushin should allow her to eat truma, but you can't use that in a kal v'chomer. It's apples and oranges. Bia after Kiddushin is 2. If I'm not mistaken, the 2 is basically there's been Kiddushin and there's also been Chuppah. So certainly in that case, she's able to eat truma. You can't use that as a comparison for a situation of Kiddushin, Kesef Kiddushin, where it's only sort of one step in, it's only Kiddushin. There hasn't been any Chuppah. Those are two separate things. You can't bring a kal v'chomer from one to the other. So Elalav Rather, it must be that it's an equal playing field, that the Kal V'chomer is coming from Bia as Kiddushin, and we're saying if Bia as Kiddushin allows her to eat Truma, so then Kesef by Kiddushin should Oichid allow her to eat Truma. Now, Omard Bishlam Nisuin also. Now, if you say that Kesef, if you say that Kiddushay Bia works as Nisuin, well, Mishum Achi Pshitale Dalima La Bia Mi Kesef. Well, then the Kal V'chomer makes sense. Meaning it's obvious, right? If we're saying that Kiddushay Bia counts as Nisuin, that is precisely why we have a Kal V'chomer. That if certainly Kiddushay Bia would allow her to eat Truma, because that's after all Nisuin. And we're using that to learn from, if we know for sure that by Kiddushay Bia she can eat Truma because that's Nisuin, so then we should say that also by Kiddushay Kesef she should be able to eat Bia, she should be able to eat Truma based on the Kal V'chomer, if by a maidservant, if by Shifcha Knainis, where Bia does not work, Kesef does allow her to eat Truma. So then by Kiddushin, where Bia allows her to eat Truma, because Kiddushay Bia is Nisuin, and that would definitely allow her to eat Truma, so then also I would say that by Kesef, Kiddushay Kesef, she should be able to eat Truma. Eli Amrit Kiddushin Osa, but if you say that Kiddushay Bia is simply Kiddushin, well then why is it any more obvious that Kiddushay Bia should allow her to eat Truma any more so than Kiddushay Kesef? How come it's obvious that by Kiddushay Bia she can eat Truma if, after all, Kiddushay Bia is only Kiddushin? And how come by Kiddushay Kesef we're not sure if she can eat Truma? How come it's obvious by Kiddushay Bia and it's not obvious by Kiddushay Kesef? If we're saying that Kiddushay Bia, after all, is only Kiddushin, so that's basically the same thing as Kesef. Why is it obvious that Kiddushay Bia would allow her to eat Truma, but not so Kesef? And we need the Kal V'chomer for Kesef. Omer Rav Nachman by Yitzchak. Okay, so one second. So we wanted to try to bring a proof from this interaction between Ben Bagbag and Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, and Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira's Kal V'chomer, that it must be that Kiddushay Bia Nisuin Osa. To which the Gemara says, Omar, Rav Nachman by Yitzchak says, Rav Nachman by Yitzchak, Le'olam Emelach, really I'll tell you, Bibia Shayidei Chuppah, that really it is talking, this Kal V'chomer, meaning I can argue that Kiddushay Bia is not Nisuin Osa, it's only Kiddushin. And how do you understand this Kal V'chomer from Bia to Kesef? It's talking about Bia Sha'al Yidei Chuppah. It's talking about Bia after the Chuppah. So after the Chuppah, and then they have Bia. So then that is definitely Nisuin. And we're saying that if by Bia, after the Chuppah, now she could definitely eat Truma. So then by Kesef, Kiddushin, she should also be able to eat Truma. And we're going to explain. We're talking about Kesef Kiddushin. And if you're going to say, yeah, but by the Bia we're talking about Kiddushin followed by Nisuin, whereas by the Kesef we're only talking about Kiddushin, how can you compare the two? Kal V'chomer Mia Isei, yes, but the Kal V'chomer would still stand. And this is the Kal V'chomer, this is what Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira sent to Ben Bagbag. Shifcha knainis, if when it comes to Shifcha knainis, she'ein biyasa ma'chilasa b'truma afilu ayidei chuppah, that Bia will never allow be the reason why a Shifcha knainis can eat Truma, even if it was after chuppah. I don't exactly know what that means, but even if, I don't know, they went under a canopy and then, is that what it means? I mean, even if somehow they had some kind of a chuppah, I don't know what that would accomplish, and then they had Bia, she would not be able to eat Truma on account of that. Kaspa ma'chilasa below chuppah. It's the fact that he purchases her with money, that is what allows her to eat Truma, regardless of a chuppah, without a chuppah. Zo shabiasa ma'chilasa betruma ayidei chuppah, when it comes to Kiddushin, when it comes to marriage, that if after chuppah he has Bia with her, now she can eat truma. Now she can eat truma, which is not the case by Shifcha Kanainis. Even if they had bia after the chuppah, she would not be able to eat truma based on that. But by Kiddushin, if after the chuppah they have bia, then now she can eat truma. So Eino Din Shekaspa. So then certainly Kiddushay bia, Kiddushay kesef, my chilasu b'truma below chuppah would enable her to eat truma without a chuppah, right? If by Shifcha Kanainis the kesef, right, bia is not an option, but kesef, even without a chuppah, allows her to eat truma. So now I would think that by marriage, where bia does enable her to eat truma when it's after the chuppah, well then I would say certainly that kesef, even without chuppah, would allow her to eat truma. Aval ma'aseh, but alas, what can I do in practice? Sharei amru chachamim, because the chacham said, "Ein arusa bas Yisrael ocheles betruma," that in arusa bas Yisrael who's engaged, betrothed to a kohen, does not eat truma ad shetikonos l'chuppah, until after the chuppah, mishum de'ula, because of ula. Who could remember what ula said? Ula said that, well, because since she is still living in her father's house, right? If she's betrothed and she's a bas Yisrael and she's betrothed to a kohen and she's not yet married, there's no nisun yet, so she's still living at her father's house. She's betrothed, but she's still living at her father's house. If she's allowed to eat truma, well then her brothers and sisters, other people in the house might end up eating her truma, and they're obviously not allowed to eat truma because they're zarim. And since she's engaged to a kohen, she's allowed to eat truma, but nobody else is. People are going to end up eating truma. That's a problem, right? It's misa b'dei shemayim for eating truma. That's a problem. So therefore, the chacham say, look, she shouldn't eat truma until she moves out of her father's house and she's living with her husband. But me'ikar adin, she should be able to eat truma when she's betrothed. Uven bagbag, so now Ben Bagbag, who seems to disagree with Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira and say that midoraisa she cannot eat truma when she's betrothed. So gabi shifcha kenainis lo shir b'kinyana or chashir b'kinyana. You can't make a kavachomer from shifcha kenainis to kiddushin. By shifcha kenainis, I understand why kesef enables her, right, kinyan kesef enables her to eat truma, because after the kinyan kesef, the kinyan is complete. She's now a shifcha kenainis. There's nothing left to be done, and she can start eating truma now. But by kiddushay kesef, there still needs to be nisuin. That's only kiddushin. It's only erison. There's still nisuin added. It's not the kinyan isn't sort of the marriage is not yet complete, and therefore I could say that you can't bring a kavachomer from shifcha kenainis to where the kinyan is complete to kiddushin where the marriage is not complete until nisuin, and therefore I can argue that by kiddushay kesef she cannot eat truma, even midoraisa, even make her adin. Now says the Gemara, Ravina Amai. Now Ravina says midoraisa mivshad pshitale de achla, or you could say that look, no, midoraisa, both Ben Bagbag and Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira agree that midoraisa she can eat truma once she's betrothed. Midoraisa she can eat truma once she's betrothed. Umidirabanon hu de shalachle. And Ben Bagbag was sending to Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira about, do we make a gzeira dirabanon? V'achi shalachle. And this is what Ben Bagbag sent to Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. Shomati alech, I heard about you, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, Shata Omer, that you say Arusa bas Yisrael ocheles betruma, that an Arusa bas Yisrael is able to eat truma. V'lo chayashta l'simpon, and we're not concerned that something is going to happen after the fact that's going to be mavatal the Kiddushin retroactively, in which case she was eating truma in a problematic way. Meaning, right? So Ben Bagbag asked Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, I understand that you say that why after betrothal, an arusa bas Yisrael can eat truma, and we're not concerned. Maybe he's going to find some kind of a mum, as we learned about Masechta Ksubis, which would invalidate the kiddushin. In which case she was never actually engaged, and now she was eating truma in a problematic way. So we're not concerned about that. Shalach lei, to which Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira responds, but don't you agree that we're not concerned about maybe something's going to come up after the fact? Ben Bagbag, I thought that you're a big Talmud Chacham and you understand Kal V'Chomer. Don't you know Uma Shifcha Kinainis? If when it comes to a Shifcha Kinainis, She'ein Biyasa Machilas B'Truma, that having that Bia will not be the reason why she's allowed to eat Truma. Kaspa Machilas B'Truma, but when he acquires her with Kesef, the Shifcha Kinainis can now eat Truma. V'lo Chayshinan L'Simpon, and we're not concerned that that anything might come up that would invalidate the sale. We say no. Once she's purchased with kesef, she can eat truma. Ma'chilasu b'truma, she can now kaspa ma'chilasu b'truma v'lo chashin l'simpon. Zo should be also ma'chilasu b'truma. So when it comes to a Bas Yisrael, that bia does enable her to eat truma. Enudin shekaspa ma'chilasu b'truma v'lo nechosh l'simpon. Then certainly Kesef, right? Kiddusha Kesef should allow her to already eat truma, and we're not concerned about invalidating the Kiddushin after the fact. But what can I do? Shari Amru, at the end of the day, the Chacham said Arusa Bas Yisrael Eino Ocheles B'Truma, and Arusa Bas Yisrael does not eat truma Ad Shetikanis L'Chuppah, until she gets married, Mishum De'ula, because of Ula, that we're concerned that maybe she's going to share it with people since she's living in her father's house. So wait until she gets married and she moves into her husband, the Kohen's house. At that point, she can eat truma. Okay, but Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira is not concerned about this simpon. Uven bagbag simpon ba'avodim leisle. Right, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira's whole kal v'chomer was based on the fact that by shifcha kinainis we're not concerned about simpon. So then by Kiddushin also we shouldn't be concerned about simpon, but Ben Bagbag simpon ba'avodim leisle. But Ben Bagbag says, look, there is nothing to be concerned about. I mean, there's nothing that might come up when it comes to a shifcha kanainis, because imumin shebegaloihu hakachazile. If we're talking about visible blemishes, I mean, you could see visible blemishes, and he accepted those. And if we're talking about hidden mums, well then, who cares about hidden mums that you find unattractive? I mean, you hired the shifcha to work, not to be attractive. Nimtza ganif or kobustus, if he turns out to be a ganif or a kidnapper or something, a murderer, higio. Well, I mean, you should have expected it, right? Rashi says, the stam eved ganefu. That stam avodim k'nainim ganefs. So my omat list mezuyinu or nichtav lemalchus. Maybe he's a dangerous fellow, or he's chayiv misa from the government. Hanukale islu. You would know about that, right? That is a voice. The yentis, right? The rumors travel about these things. So therefore, look, when it comes to shifcha kanainis, there's really nothing to be concerned. Right? There is no potential simpon, and that's why there's no concern there. But by kiddushin, I would say that we would have to be concerned about some kind of simpon, and therefore she shouldn't be able to eat. Even though midoraisa she can eat truma because of this concern, but maybe you'll find like a mum, so then she can't eat truma. Therefore, I would argue that she cannot eat truma midirabanon. But so which the Gemara concludes by asking the question, look, at the end of the day, both according to Ben Bagbag, an Arusa cannot eat truma because we're concerned about simpon. According to Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, was not concerned about simpon, but he's concerned about she might feed it to the other people in her house. At the end of the day, both according to Ben Bagbag and according to Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, she can't eat truma. So what's the difference? So well, for example, what if the husband knew about these mumin, but he was okay with them? So according to Ben Bagbag, there's no concern anymore because there's no simpon, right? He's cool with these mums, but there is a concern about that, right? That like Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, that she'll share it with the people in her house. Alternatively, if he already sent over, kibel, a masar, if the father gave his daughter to the shluchei abal, to the messengers of the husband for to get married, v'halach, or if what was v'halach, or Where am I? Or the messengers of the father went with the messengers of the husband. So in that case, she's no longer home, and therefore she's no longer going to be feeding the truma to anybody, but they're still concerned that maybe you'll find the mum, and that can be an issue. So that's the nafkamina. Friends, that was Avyud of Masechta Kiddushin. Okay, it got a little bit technical and arguably complicated at the end there, but the beginning of the daf talked about is Tchilas Bia Kona or is Sof Bia Kona? I believe we said Sof Bia is Kona. Then we asked the Shaila does Kiddushay Bia, is it considered Nisuin or just regular Kiddushin? I think at the end we ultimately said I think it's just regular Kiddushin. That was an interesting thing. And then we talked about an Arusa being able to eat Truma. I mean, ultimately, she can't, whether it's because of the concern of Ben Bagbag, because of Simpon, or whether it's because of Rabbi Ben Beseru, who quotes Ula, that she might feed it to the people in her family, who are not allowed to eat it. Friends, that was the Avyud of Masechta Kiddushin. Hope you enjoy. Peace out.